Hello, this is the traditional nowadays. Developer, ask me anything. That means in the audience, any question you have, something you really, really wanted to ask a developer, you can ask it. And if you want to have a good tip, you should ask them something, they will immediately start coding afterwards, right? So you have to send simple questions, very simple, easy things that they think, that's a great idea. That kind of questions are really good. But before we start, I would like to ask the developer to say their name and what do you do for Blender?
I am Sibren, and I've been working on Alembic support and caching and some modifier stuff for 2.8.
Clap, clap.
I am Inez Almeida. The nickname is Brita. And I'm a bit of a generalist. I'm mostly interested in tools. And I'm working part-time as a volunteer.
Hi, I'm Brecht. I've worked on many areas of Blender, but mainly I've worked on cycles. And at the moment, I'm coordinating the 2.8 development.
Whoa.
I'm Jacques. I worked on animation nodes in the last few years, and now I moved to Amsterdam to work on Blender 2.8 and everything nodes.
Hi, my name is Thomas Beck. I'm a volunteer as well. I help to fix bugs, and I try to help porting the single operators to multi-object operator mode.
Hi, so I am Bastien Montagne, and I've been working mostly on, let's call it, data management in Blender so far.
Hello, I'm Sergey. I'm working mostly as a senior software janitor.
Sergey can code anything you want him to do, everything. So just be very nice to him and he will do it. What?
Hi, I'm Clément Foucault, and I'm coding the new viewport and Eevee.
Hi, I'm Lukas Stockner. I'm mostly working on cycles, so specifically right now animation, denoising, and cycles network rendering.
Yep.
My name is William Rainish, and to be honest, I often find myself on the other side pleading with developers to help out with UI topics, but even so, I do some UI work from time to time. So, yeah.
Hi, I'm Jeroen, and I've been working on the viewport last year and on the CrowdSim and B2C 101 stuff.
Hi, I'm Benoit Bolsé. I was very active 10 years ago to revive the game engine, and I'm back on the team to implement a new Blender interactive mode in 2.8.
Hi, I'm Howard Trickey. I'm a volunteer. I work mainly on mesh tools. In particular, I've been spending a lot of time on Bevel.
Hi, I'm Monique. I've been working on a crowd simulation for Blender, doing some patches now and then, and B2D 101.
Good. Okay, let's go to the back. Who has a question? Who dares to be the first? There.
Yes, of course, thank you for everything you are doing right now. And I have just a very simple question. Can we expect to have multi-object sculpting? Sculpting. 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 Just to sculpt.
I'm not sure if it will be in 2.80, but it's Dalai is basically adding multi-object everything like one by one to the modes. So I'm not sure it will be in 2.80, but it's definitely planned to be added.
Good. No, simple question. So it will be done. Who else? Come up. Otherwise, I will ask questions. So, what is the... there's one. Well, I now have a question, so how is physics doing in Blender? Well, physics is falling behind, OpenVDB and all that kind of stuff. So who here has that on their radar? Physics things. Anyone? Huh?
I don't think there's really... Well...
I think that is assigned to me, but it needs to be checked what happened in the past few months.
Huh? Or we gave it to Sibren. Huh?
Yeah.
Huh?
I would love to work on it, but it requires a few more members of the development fund.
That's smart. That's really smart. Okay. Who has hands? Okay. You want to do?
Hello from Russia, especially have some hellos for Sergey from our Russian community, and there will be I think pretty complex question, because we have some guys that work in pretty big studios, and they are trying hard defending their right to work in Blender in the studios, and there are complex computer systems which are supported by system administrators, and people have no access to their own systems. Now straight to the questions. He asked me to advocate for, I even don't know what it is, it's glibc version. He said it's a new version in dailies, and it was old version in a stable release. And he wants to use it, but he can't because their system administrators don't let them update their systems themselves. So is there a way to compile Blender with static libraries linking? I don't understand those words, so I'll just try to remember.
So the short answer is it's a mess. The longer answer is it's of course technically possible to create static link with older libc. In reality, it has some downsides for the people who has newer systems, because newer libc often has more optimal math library. So if you want to have really fast rendering and you have newer libc on newer libc, having two different builds will be very confusing. So for now, maybe it's easier to have the build environment in your studio, where you can just create builds specifically for your platform. It shouldn't be that hard nowadays, because we have all the scripts ready to be compiled on specific Linux, and it should just work. The static, we cannot link statically against libc. So this. Not with libc. Libc is dynamic, and that's the only dynamic dependency we have, and we can't have it static.
I mean, usually the question for these old glibc version is for Red Hat versions like CentOS, and on devtalk.blender.org there's a thread where people have figured out how to compile Blender statically on there. There's instructions, you go there, you copy the commands, and in principle you should have a static build that you can use.
So that's technically possible, right?
Yes, we're just not providing it ourselves at the moment, but you can make your own build.
To make sure that stupid people like me also understand it, I mean, in the past, really long ago, when I was also developing Blender, we had a static version always next to the dynamic version, and mainly for testing, because people then always knew that independent what installation you have, you can run Blender. Even when you have older or newer libraries. So we made a static version that had everything in it. Every library that was depending, almost every library. I think libc was in it, and etc. Yeah.
I think that's the one thing that was never in it.
No?
The only way you can have static libc is you have static everything.
Yeah.
You cannot have static X11 and OpenGL libraries. You cannot bundle static libc in there.
No.
No way.
No. But.
There is no but.
Okay, next one.
So yeah, concerning a viewport, I tend to use a lot CAD imports in Blender, which means you have like 5,000 objects, 10,000 objects with between 5 and 50 million polygons. And I really see it every year that it's really a weakness of Blender. It really slows down working on it, and it does, Ton. It does. So, and I mean, it's unfortunately it's possible if I look like 3ds, look at 3ds Max, look at Maya. So, please keep on working on making the viewport fast. It really makes us artists making work even faster. So, thank you.
What's the question?
So I know a little bit of this. But maybe he will ignore me and say I'm not wrong, but this question popped up a couple of times at this conference too. So if you have 10 or 20 or 30 or 40,000 objects in the viewport, you create a lot of overhead for the whole system in Blender. That's dependencies. Every draw command, I think, per object is setting things and has to upload textures and prepare materials or CLSL. And so a lot of optimization is happening on object level. Assuming that your scene is well balanced, so you have not more objects in the scene than you can manage yourself. So usually, even when you have this scene here, this is 80 people. There's still, and you could say, well, every person is one object. It could be one group or so. And then the dependency system and the drawing system can optimize things better. That's one of the reasons, because for example, I don't know what kind of objects are you talking about. Is it 50,000 watt cars or leaves in a tree or?
So yeah, I imported like proper CAD import out of CATIA of cars, and I think I ended up with 250 million polygons. And like I could just really handle it if I split it up in 24 separate Blender files. And I linked these Blender files into a master file where I rendered those. But working with 250 million polygons is no fun. It's like really, it really remembers you of working like with a console. You really have to think, okay, what hotkey do I press? And then you wait for a minute. And it's, yeah.
One of the ways how to solve it well is to make sure that at least the test files in the SVN, that we have 1 or 2 test files that really push this limit with lots of polygons and lots of objects, and make sure that you can still select, click, 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 without having to wait 5 seconds, and that you can handle this for rendering or whatever purpose, that you can use it. But 250 million polygons is the limit, right? It's a limit. But 5 million should be fine in Blender. Totally. So that's where we have to push the limits then to go to 10, 20, 30, 50 and move on. But anyway, I know the object problem is existing, right? You guys know it too. It's a matter of profiling and see, okay, where is all the overhead going to? Is it graphics card related? Is it dependency graph? Or what is it? So it's a good topic. Good.
I've had some experience of this, and most vehicles now, people model them first of all in the finite element analysis packages, and if you can use the output from the FE packages, they will actually control how many faces that they put out. So that's a way to look at it. Don't just start from the CAD, look at the finite element package that they use to generate the CAD, and then you get much lower count on the faces that you need to manage inside Blender. So it's an option.
New question?
Hi, this is a question specifically about rendering and glass and caustics. Most of the scenes that we work on have interiors, real-world interiors, and they're full of metal and glass and wonderful things like that. And I know it's difficult for ray tracing rendering, but what is the future for glass and caustics and transparencies working well, better in both cycles and, if possible, in Eevee? Maybe impossible, but that's what I'd really like to know. Thank you.
Well, in Eevee, there's so much we can do with without ray tracing. So that's what we are doing right now. It's like screen space hacks. When we will be supporting ray tracing in the future, maybe we will get to the cycles point, but there's no there's no plan for it for now.
Yeah, so in cycles, there's sort of two ways we could try to improve this. One is use one thing I would really like to do is basically have better automatic approximations kind of to caustics that render with little noise, which are typically the things that are used like in like movie production. And the other way would be to go like all the way to bidirectional and MLT type algorithms, but then you get much longer render times. And so working at least on the approximation and having it so that you can add a glass material by default and it sort of renders with a reasonable amount of noise is something I would really like to work on. I don't know when exactly, but it's definitely in the plans.
Hello.
Just one thing to add to the bidirectional path tracing is that's something that's been requested in cycles quite a lot and for quite some time. Obviously, especially for architectural visualization and scenes with heavy caustics. The thing is, in practice, bidirectional path tracing is not that useful for the vast majority of scenes. It's really a specialized subset where it helps, but it makes the code a lot more complex, and it's incompatible with a lot of things that Cycles offers. For example, Cycles has the ray visibility stuff, and you can do quite a lot of advanced and weird things in shaders, which are all absolutely incompatible with bidirectional path tracing. So if we were to add this, you would get quite a complicated mess where some features only work in conjunction with some other features, which is why we're kind of hesitant to go into that direction. It might be necessary in the future, but it's not as easy as it sounds. And there's definitely trade-offs there.
Okay. I would like to return to this question about older Glipsy version, because I also have the same problem on old computer labs. So maybe there will be an idea to ask the community effort for creating such Blender compilation and put it in GraphiCall, for example. We know that on GraphiCall, this website, we can download some experimental, non-typical Blender versions, and maybe that could be the solution for you. Maybe somebody will do that for us, or maybe somebody of you put that kind of compilation there. So that's the idea. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks. Could you talk about the Blender interactive mode that's replacing the game engine? What are the plans with that? And because I haven't heard much yet.
There's a plan which is on the wiki. I will make the link public so that everybody can follow the progress of that project. It will be in steps. The first step is to have a continuous physics mode. So you have the viewport and objects are falling in real time, and you can still act, play the animation and so on. So animation will be able to run while the physics is running. And then we will create an event system by which every possible things happening in Blender can create events that can be fed into a logic system, and the logic system will be node-based. And so will be done in collaboration with Jack Luke. He's not here. AD at least. It will probably take a year from now, but we hope to get there. Yeah. Then it will be enough to make prototypes and walk through and things like that.
the most beloved topic, UI. I'm probably a bad example and using 2.79, and I don't know, maybe I know 200 or 300 shortcuts. If I go into 2.8, I really struggle to get my efficient workflow going because a huge amount of shortcuts, of course, we have removed, but also some submenus when you open are, in my opinion, weirdly designed, like the Control E for the Edge mode. And then it was usually like twice as big in 2.79. Now it was half the size, and then there's a pop-up in second layer. Why do you do these kind of things and not just keep the second layer and make it a single layer menu? Because with shortcuts, you go into the menu with another shortcut, or you can press a second button, and then you remove a layer of shortcuts, so it's much, much quicker. So is there any reason why you have made this decision to make it a second layer pop-up menu in this case?
I could try to answer that somewhat. The first question was, why have some keys been removed? And that's part of the, you can answer that too, it's part of the concept of the minimal key map. Because over time, as you know, most of Blender's features have been mapped to keyboard shortcuts, and over time the keyboard has become really full with features, meaning that if you want to add your own keys to certain features that you like to use a lot, it's impossible to find a free shortcut. And as we add more features, we have this problem where everything is really sort of being filled up. So for 2.8, Ton had the idea to kind of cull the keyboard somewhat so that things can be pared back and add more room for users to add their own keyboard shortcuts. The specific thing with the menu, you can show me afterwards, we can look at it, yeah.
Just in case with this, I did the quick favorites, which is kind of the solution to the too many shortcuts, in my opinion. I would love to have the full keyboard with shortcuts, and users then just put their stuff, which I like in the quick favorites. But, yeah.
Say it again, sorry?
The solution with remove all the shortcuts and let people assign them.
Right.
It kind of works also with the quick favorites. Like you just make your own kind of menu where you add your shortcuts or the things you use most, but just keep the full keyboard because you have this single quick favorite thing.
Right. Yeah.
So my view, keep the keyboard full of shortcuts with all the functions like we have them. And if people have a feature that you want to use more often and there's no shortcut for it, they can add it to the quick favorites anyways. So it's not a reason to remove all the shortcuts from the keyboard.
Well, we definitely do not want to remove all the shortcuts.
It feels like it.
The idea is that using a minimal key map, which we maintain and keep it official, you can have the documentation based on it, and then we have something we agree on. Only what we agree on. So if we don't agree on a key, we should not put it in the default key map, because we don't agree on it. That means that you want to have up arrow assigned to 10 frames plus, and the animators want to have up arrow assigned to go to the next keyframe or so. You can never agree on it. And instead of trying to then have some kind of compromise where you give some keys to the animators and some keys to the grease pencil people and some to the whatever, we decided, well, let's not do it. We put a minimum key map in place that has the widest support from everyone, and then make sure that people then feel more welcome or invited to add their own complete map, which you then also should be able to share. So you can say, wow, you can have the annual price map, or you can have your personal map, or you can have a scoped map. And we even have the concept that per workspace, you can even switch shortcut defaults if you like to. This is still what we have to test. So that's why, and I think that's a positive thing.
Hello. We are thinking for the next roadmap in the Grease Pencil is integrate Grease Pencil with Eevee. So what is just for us? What is the thing? What will be the main problem to integrate the Grease Pencil in Eevee? This is just
matter of work, or there is a potential problem in this area?
What do you mean by integrating it into Eevee?
Yeah, like for example, like the grease pencil objects interact with the dove or FOV,
with the lighting
or lighting things, all this kind of stuff. The side, the shadows, all this kind of stuff.
Well, actually, I don't think there is much problem. It's just a matter of the grease pencil geometry to be aware. Eevee to be aware of the grease pencil geometry. So I don't think it's a major problem.
Okay, perfect.
So it's very easy to do, and will be done next week or so. Yeah, that's like it.
Later today.
That's the conclusion. You also,
yeah? Excuse me, my English. It's a stupid question for viewport. It's many possible for change the size of area, face, length, edge on the extra. It's not possible. It's in the future for possible this.
You mean the
if you see the length example, activate length of the edge.
Yes.
The size of the font. It's no change. It's no change in interface. It's not possible for change. It's many stupid.
Well, it's a bug, so we will fix it.
You could just use the measure it add-on.
No, there is an option to there is an option to measure to display the length of the edges. Yes, but
the angle displays the face area.
Yeah, I record it and it was working when I recorded. So if it's not working.
No impression.
The font size is not working. Okay, so it's
if you have,
we'll
this is like it looks like a little glitch or a bug or so. You show it to him or them after, and we look at it. Right?
It's a bug.
Thank you. I have already 3 questions. So somebody has to ask for that. The question is, will the VSE get some more love? And is there somebody just going to do that? Should I repeat? So the question is about video sequence editor, my favorite tool in Blender for years. Will it got some love in the near future? So that's the first question.
God of, what's that?
Video sequence editor.
Fun.blender.org, subscribe today, don't delay.
I already subscribed.
The Blender developer who was very active in the first 10 years of the decade, have you got that, the noughties? He coming back, and he said, "Oh, I have a nice job now. I want to have a nice job on Blender." And I thought of the video sequence. What do you think? So it might happen, but I don't know. The video sequence is my favorite part of Blender personally, but they threaten to keep it, to throw it out or so sometimes. But not going to happen, right? Not going to happen. We keep it, but it's a code that hasn't been in support since 2.5, I think. So in 8 years' time, we only kept it work, but it didn't have the love and attention of a developer. And as soon as I find such a developer, I will put them on it. Yeah. You and then you.
So actually, I want to support the VSE request. Actually, we are a startup from Israel. We use Blender in production to render a lot of videos, thousands of videos per day. Actually, the Blender interface is great because my colleague, which is also in here, is the 3D artist and I'm the developer. And basically, we use Blender in production as Python model. And my question is related to the Python model, whether in 2.8 are you going to support it? The wiki article about compiling the Python model is actually outdated for many, many years. And I would appreciate some love and attention towards that perspective as well.
Yeah, I guess it's kind of on our to-do list. I mean, we don't plan to drop it, so it will be supported for the beta or during the beta phase. But yes, we're not dropping it at all.
You mean that option which was added by Campbell as something like experimental thing, and now the full industry relies on it? Yeah, we are definitely keeping that. Yeah.
But isn't this also an issue with technical documentation in general here in this whole, huh?
Well, we just
Not
had a
really.
discussion about that.
Yeah.
So because we are going to do the beta in 2-3 weeks, right? Is there documentation for the beta?
Some parts are okay, some parts are still missing, so it's ongoing work.
You are the documentation expert. No, this is also something the community, of course, could, really should help us. There's so many things being in development, and the developers should be developing most of the time. They have to write a little bit decent logs and commit logs, but good technical documentation is also work. We look at how does EV work, or we should have, for example, a 2.8 migration document that explains in a way that somebody can, in half an hour or so, has all the highlights of what has been changing or what is new, or how do I bring back things that I like to use. So there's a big opportunity for people who like to write, or the video tutorial people that like make a 2.8 migration video, and you get 1 million hits, I bet. So it's welcome if people do that.
Hi. Hello. I wanted to know if there will be, it's a question actually about the interactive mode, maybe some rigid body bones where you can maybe tweak some elasticity and to have some overlap in your animation when you can tweak like the physics and between handmade animation and physics, and if it will be possible or will be integrated.
Well, it's a bit early to answer that question, and I can't really say at this moment, except that everything that will be in Blender will be in the interactive mode. So if such bone exists, I implement it in Blender, then they will be available in the interactive mode.
The concept of this new real-time interactive mode is that it supports everything Blender has, period. So if we have elastic bones or bendy bones or metal balls or smoke, fire, particles, hair, wireframes, everything Blender can do is available in... Oh, we don't have wireframes, wait. So everything Blender can do is part of what you can control in interaction mode. And we are not going to add features there which is not in the animation system, or which is not available elsewhere. So if you say, I would like to have specific features for characters or to control characters interactively, then we have to make sure that our animation system supports it. And then everybody's happy, but animators also want to have that kind of control, I'm sure. Yeah? Okay.
I have a question about interactive mode too. This is like if you consider that if it wouldn't be better to do kind of a marriage with one of the open source engines, because I think like what might happen that if you do some simple interactive mode, then users might bump you with feature requests because they think it's in a game engine actually. Or so aren't you like afraid of this, that like there is an intent to do something simple and people will like take it like as something else, this interactive mode?
Well, we're doing it for Blender for sure. That's the idea, and it will be more like a prototype tool than the game engine. Definitely not a game engine as the way you're thinking, as the way people think usually. So it will be for Blender, but however, we will keep in mind the possibility to export, especially the logic. We'll try to design the logic in a way that it can be exported. And if you can export the Blender objects and their characteristics to, today you do it already to Unity or to Godot or so, then it will be nice if the logic can also be exported. We'll just try to make that possible, although the first release will be for Blender only, yeah. And then after that, things can happen.
So I noticed that there was a summer code project on improving volume rendering support of cycles.
I was wondering what the status of that is, because I haven't seen much happening there. And it would be really great to have better general volume rendering support for cycles, especially for scientific data.
So the status is there's a few things that need to be solved before we can merge it, because there's just, if we would merge it now, we would break a few things. So it's basically a matter of me or some other cycle developer having a week or so to dedicate to it. But it's definitely something I really care about, and hopefully like within the next, I don't know, I don't want to promise a date, but it's like pretty high on my priority list. Yeah.
Okay, can I? So the question is probably to you, Brecht, or somebody else who is actively maintaining Cycles. The rumors are that the Cycles or EV or materials created with them using nodes will be somehow compatible with Unreal Engine. So that's the first question. Is that true, or how it will be going in the future? And another one is that somebody of you already mentioned that there are some new shaders planned. And what will be that? Can you just elaborate a little?
Okay, so in terms of compatibility, I mean, the thing is we adopted the principal BSDF, which is like the standard shader model used in Unreal, and it's also in Unity and so on. And so it's mostly a matter of making our exporters export this data correctly into FBX and I guess GLTF and those file formats. And actually, I think they're already doing it in 2.8 quite well, or GLTF did it quite well in 2.7, but we can still improve it. But it's
no, it's not a complaint. But I mean, for FBX at least, we are still using the standard Func shader. So it's a conversion between the principal node we have in Blender and the Func shader we have in FBX. Because I'm not sure that FBX actually has a way to represent. I mean, they have custom shaders, which is like weird, complicated stuff. But don't have a basic representation of principal shaders.
I think it does, but
I have to check new versions.
So I think we can. I mean, I'm quite sure it's possible. At least the GLTF exporter exports the principal shader. Like it's an add-on you can download, and it should be compatible with Unreal, I believe. And the other part is new shade. The other question was new shaders. In Cycles, is more flexible texture nodes to create all kinds of textures. There's a few patches under development there. So I think those are, I'm not sure if you're thinking about specific ones, but mainly new texture nodes is what I'm thinking of.
Hi. I wanted to ask if there is plans for any improvement in the tracking, and specifically the implementation, at least, of a Summer of Code project for having two video sources for the same tracking. I don't know if you know what I'm talking about.
Yes, I know what you're talking about. I've been mentoring that project.
Yeah, I know. Okay.
There were some remaining issues to be solved in that integration, and at some point I lost activity from the student. So I'm not sure if he's still interested or not. And currently I don't have time to look into tracking myself. But like improving tracking is like, I would like to do this, but yeah, new developers are needed, so I can spend time on the more fun stuff. Yeah.
Okay, thanks.
Hi, I have a user interface question, and with the new tool panel and the new gizmos already, the Blender user face is a lot more, and maybe create workspaces or modes where, for example, where you could maybe sculpt without relying on any keyboard input or something like that goes into that direction.
Well, that's the good answer, right? That it's like you could say we have been thinking about this to make it so that you can use it Blender better with less keyboard use or with no keyboard. That's why you have the little viewport gizmo in the corner and a few other changes. So that should make it more flexible. But like if you're thinking about like Blender for the iPad or something like that, that's not. There's some other issues, licenses and other issues with that. So it's not anything we're doing in the short term, but other kind of touch-enabled and pen-driven systems, we want to make, support that better. So that's.
You got the Surface demo?
Not here.
Did you got the Surface demo?
No.
No.
But I played with it anyway.
Yeah, 2, 3 in a row. Good.
Hey, I want to bring up everyone's favorite topic. Are there plans, or would it be possible maybe in the future to have different display transform per display, so that if I have an sRGB monitor and then my HDR monitor, yeah, it's colors.
Do you really have two different? Sebastian, do you really have two different monitors?
Not yet, but it depends. Like, if this will never be supported, why would I buy an HDR monitor? But if there is a chance that there might be support for different display transforms, then it would make sense, because our colorist, he is working with. But yeah, like working for a film, that would make a lot of sense to have.
Does a good HDR monitor cost?
I don't know.
It goes in the thousands or more, right? So this is a typical professional topic, like the vendors of those HDR screens. Why don't they, if they look at this video, they should support this. Blender is open source. If they want to sell more of those screens, they could get the code and make sure that Blender works very well with calibration for color. Because it's a very difficult thing to code if you don't have all the hardware and all the knowledge and the passion and the motivation to do it. So you can ask him to do it, right? And yeah, maybe he likes it. No.
Just to add to that, even if you have two identical monitors, it might still be interesting to use different profiles, because if you're calibrating them, the monitors aren't exact. So if you really care about color, you're going to have different calibration profiles on both of them. And generally, the entire user interface color management thing is an interesting question, because, for example, new Macs often have like non-Rec 709 displays. So if you want to use user interface themes, the entire user interface might look different on the other system, because the user interface in Blender is currently not color managed. So I think there's something to look into, yeah.
In Blender, we rely on a driver-side calibration for the monitors. There are no plans to integrate software-side calibration. Supporting per window probably display spaces is technically possible. There is like no technical limitation under the hood of the color management pipeline. It's more into how you set up your workflow in a Blender in a way that it's reliable and understandable, and also reliable in a way that you save blend file with two windows and open it back, and that windows don't get swapped onto the monitors. It's like all fun like this, that's where all the fun is going. But
hey, unfortunately, I'm not technical enough to understand the whole dynamic linking or glibc, but just to put Flatpak on Sergey's radar, it actually was built to address one of these use cases. So people are running old RHEL systems and running modern apps on them. And also Flatpak. I mean, Blender is already distributed as a Flatpak by a third party. Mathieu Bredon is building based on your recipes to build them. So I would love to make you aware of a possible solution to that problem. Thank you.
Well, we are aware of those things. It's in practice, you always need to have something pre-installed to run those things. And the idea of Blender, you get like any Blender distro, you freshly install it, you download stuff from Blender, double click, and it just works. So that's what we want to support as much as possible. But we are not against of like other stuff for distributing Blender, like surely. Especially if there is someone who wills to maintain it, then yeah.
Hi, I had a question for Lucas, specifically about denoising. Since we now have nice support with Filmic for high dynamic range scenes, I did some tests, and I mean, it works fantastic, but I did have some edge cases where they are still, like, it's a little rough around the edges. Specifically when you have scenes with high dynamic range, like really, really bright lights and dark scene, you get some pretty weird artifacts in the scene. Is there any way, or is there any plans to still like improve the denoising? Is there some new iteration coming with 2.8?
First of all, yes, there absolutely are plans to improve the denoiser. As I previously mentioned, I'm working on animation denoising, so that's going to be published as a patch in like an hour, I guess. It's very close to being finished. And regarding the high dynamic range, there are two reasons why these problems might be there. The first problem is the denoiser uses a firefly detection algorithm to remove fireflies from the image before denoising. So that can be a problem for single pixel highlights or extremely thin reflections on curved edges, for example. But in this case, they would just be removed. There wouldn't be an artifact. The second case is that the numerical algorithms aren't exactly stable. So if you have like one pixel with a value of 10,000, that might be a problem. There is a way to fix that, which I have not tried yet, but which is very easy. It's from some paper released a few years ago where you basically apply a log transform to the colors, then do the denoising, and then transform it back, which might change the look a tiny bit, but I have to try it out. So yeah, thanks for the reminder.
I have a very boring question, but I think it's very important. It's more or less about 2.8 UI, and it's especially about workplace ergonomics, because I think all of us want to have a long and healthy career, and I think that optimizing the new interface needs to consider ergonomics as well. So, for example, things like making like single column layout is super cool to be able to read like full tags, but after a while you know what they mean. But it kind of adds up that you really have to go, there's more and more scrolling, more and more clicking to go sub-menus and pop-overs and scroll to reach menus. And I think that's, on the long term, it's really adding up for a certain kind of people who maybe work a lot as a designer, and then they go home and they have a hobby that's kind of the same. Those clicks, they add up, and I think we need to think about that as well for the UI in 2.8.
Very short follow-up. It's just something I just remembered. If you can share this file, please just create a bug report. Like, I suppose it's technically not a bug, but if you can share it, I would love to look at it and have something to test. Thanks.
It's a very good point, and we have a few things to try to remedy this a little bit. One of the things that we've added is the concept of subpanels. So things are more hierarchical now. So if you want to find certain properties, you don't have to have everything open at once, which should reduce scrolling a whole lot. And by default now, most of our panels are closed, meaning it takes up a lot less vertical space. So you'll have to just dive in to the hierarchy to find what you're looking for. The other thing we're thinking about adding is a way to search for properties. Someone made a nice demo of this, where there could be at the top of the properties a search box, and you could type in a few characters, which would be another way to locate what you're looking for. The third answer is a lot of things like modifiers are a little bit clumsy when you have many, many, many modifiers. Also in 2.5, and until now you'd have to scroll a lot. But that whole area is being revised with the node-based modifiers as well. But in general, it's an important concern to think about ways to always present, easy ways to find what you're looking for without scrolling and searching.
Yeah, I can see the positive changes. I just want to point to the bad changes for this kind of concern. And I think like having it right there is good, but the best case is just to have as much information. If it's nested, it's all collapsed, and I have to uncollapse it every single time. This also adds up. But like I think removing or reducing padding as much as possible while maintaining a really good UI, which is a really hard task. I think like all the padding and getting things closer together to a limit, that helps more than these things, I think.
Yeah, I mean, the nice thing is we have a scalable user interface, so you can make things really, really smooth.
I mean, what you say is super valid, and this is why we need a bigger and a big UI team to do research and make versions, make another configuration with different panels, try to find out how to have less options. Nobody needs all those buttons all the time, but how do you select this? How do you make a way that you can have in Blender there are 10,000 buttons or 20,000? How do you combine that in a way that you can use it? Nodes.
For particles,
yeah, but then you get everything nodes, and then you have 5,000 nodes, and then how do you find your node, right?
You hit
More
Control
nodes.
F.
Three-dimensional nodes, layer nodes, everything nodes. He was there first. Oh, did you have a reply to this?
Can I add another
Okay,
very last thing to your point before, because I think it is a valid concern. Another thing we have talked about is for the outliner to make a more context-sensitive outliner. There are some technical issues with it, but you could imagine a way in which you could, using the outliner, more narrowly define what you have selected and what you're editing, so you wouldn't have so many panels and so many options in the properties editor at a given time. This should also alleviate this issue somewhat.
Yeah. I'm sorry, I wanted to reply because I worked on this topic like as an add-on developer, and I developed an add-on that is called Tabs. It's on GitHub, and kind of it's muscle memory, and it basically makes any property reachable through 2 clicks. And yeah, check it out online. It's called Tabs, and it's on GitHub.
Yeah, you asked, but there was somebody first.
Well, if it's also about ergonomics, have you thought about left-hand users? Can we switch around everything now at the moment? Just build our own viewport the way, switch around left-handed?
Are you left-handed? Mm-hmm. But do you see specific problems as a left-hand user?
Yes, I think especially if you're modeling and you have to go here and you want maybe to have your tools on the right-hand side, and some things you can get used to anything, but you want to switch out things. It's easier.
Can I ask you, is this something that the OS you're using does? Is that your other tools do this? Flip the mouse and the whole interface around, or?
Not so many.
No.
No, but why not have Blender be the first to do it? To think about it.
Right. I was just asking for clarification, not to say. Yeah.
So for the OS, some of them will do like flipping the mouse button through, so your left mouse click becomes on the right. So when you flip the mouse on the left side, it's
flipped.
There are such keyboards, I believe.
Huh?
I believe there are such keyboards already.
Yeah?
Yeah.
Oh, okay.
I was just going to say that I noticed in the Blender Cloud videos that Andy has like a split keyboard. So if you kept all the shortcuts, or most of if you kept most of the shortcuts on the left-hand side of the keyboard, and then had an option where you could just kind of move them onto the other side, maybe that would be an option. But it doesn't look like.
But this is why we have this minimal key map to make it easier for people to maintain their own versions and share it. I mean, we can't make everybody happy with one thing and one configuration.
You can have multiple configurations, but default though.
You don't call it default. That also helps. Just a configuration, the minimum.
Distributed from Blender Tower.
Yeah. And then you? Okay. Oh, you have
Thank you. I have one question for Jacques Luc on every nodes, or simple nodes for a beginner. It's possible when you have the viewport 3D and you tap T panel. between the viewport 3D on T-panel, you can add very fast some nodes for the alpha of the brush. Or you can add multiply for one more random some nodes, basic nodes.
I'm not exactly sure what you are talking about, to be honest. Like just some option to insert certain nodes faster, or
no? It's just for a beginner. For they don't open a shader node. No, not a shader. Yeah, a window with the nodes. You can activate some nodes very fast. No.
No, I mean, as I understand it, you're asking about a way to edit node quickly without having to open a node editor. So you can just don't have to go and open a node editor. Instead, I mean, we kind of did something like this for Cycles, where the material properties also show the nodes. I don't think it was entirely successful, but I think when we do the Everything Nodes project, we can reevaluate how to present nodes in a compact way without having to open the node editor for simple stuff.
I even have a cool name for it. Node rigging. Huh? Node rigging. And try to imagine how node rigging looks like. So you have nodes, 5 million, and then you rig them so that they are in control of the user. Huh? You see the picture? You see the picture? Okay, good. And you have somebody here.
I would like to ask about 2 other very hot themes. I would like to know about the current state of adaptive sampling in Cycles, because I'm personally waiting for a long time for this. Would be a really cool feature. And I would like to ask about the current state of panoramic camera in Eevee, maybe a 360 rendering or even 360 stereo rendering would be cool.
So for adaptive sampling, I don't really have any news on it. The only thing I can say is I think it's really important, and like if I had free time, it might be the one feature I would like to work on if I had a bunch of time. But at the moment, it's not under development, I think.
Part in 1 hour, right? To give some background on the animation, on the adaptive sampling, that's a topic that I really like and that I really care about. I mean, it was my first ever patch for Cycles, was actually the adaptive sampling. The problem there is it's easy to make an adaptive sampling that works for most scenes, that kind of works for most scenes. It's extremely hard to make an adaptive sampling that works for all scenes. Because, for example, the problem is if you have caustics which have an extremely low noise level, you might render 8 samples, then the software looks at the image and says, that's clean, we can stop rendering. You need a lot of samples, so eventually you end up with this problem where some tiles have randomly detected fireflies, so they got 1,000 samples, the others didn't, so they get only 4 samples, so you get an extremely splotchy image. And that's only the tip of the iceberg. There's so many problems there that, in theory, it sounds like it should be easy, but it really isn't. So, yeah, that's kind of the problem there.
To me, it just seems like an interesting technical thing to be solved.
Okay, the Eevee question.
And to answer the Eevee question, it's planned. And Dalai already had some patch working, so it's definitely possible.
Yeah, very quick about the adaptive sampling. I think it's not really a problem that adaptive sampling sometimes can detect some, for example, barely visible fireflies and then continue rendering, because you could just add some settings like minimal sampling, maximum sampling, and here you go. It's just on the user side. Software doesn't need to decide on such corner cases.
It might be possible to do it in a very conservative way, where the problem is when people hear adaptive sampling, they usually they want it to work perfectly, like it should immediately stop and everything. If we do it a lot more conservatively, where you set a minimum render samples of 128 and then it checks, that might work, but it has to be solid, because if there's one thing the users don't want, it's to hit F12, wait 2 hours, and then they get an image that looks like shit because some spots are still noisy. So it has to be perfectly reliable, and that's the hard part.
Another thing we figured in the production is when you have like all those like little knobs to control your render time. It's like you don't really know what happens in your shot, which could consist of 500 settings, mostly work for 90% of the frames. Then the rest you need to re-render, and because of those things, they're not really unbiased. You need to re-render everything. So it's like trade-offs.
I have a weird question. Like when you do a grass scene in Blender, the particle system, like just with a few grass particles, like 3 million or something, the file size gets so large. Can I expect that if this transported to animation nodes or like everything nodes, that the file size will be smaller?
I don't know, maybe. I guess when all the information can be stored in nodes, that's necessary, then there could be an option that the generation of Seagrass is done at runtime only and not stored in the file, and then it has to be generated every time you open the file. Could be.
Thanks.
With particles, especially when you have some simulation, then you can reopen a file real quickly, but this is just like topic for reconsideration, I guess, to see where we are and how much we can regenerate from the scratch in a reasonable time and how much stuff you really need to dump in the blend file.
Is there a certain reason that the icons got black and white? Because if you go to the properties panel, you have these tiny little icons where everyone has the same color now. It's really, really hard to distinguish.
I can. I could say a few things about the new icons that hopefully should answer your question. First of all, the new icons are sort of they're drawn in a different way. So we refer to them as the monochrome icons, but they're really more like glyphs than little pictures. And what that allows us to do is actually to theme them. So I'm sure you've seen inside of the outliner that the monochrome icons are actually colored, depending on, they're color-coded depending on what type they represent. And so we've discussed ways to expand this to more areas of Blender so that the theming of icons can be added in more places. And one of them could be the header of the properties, so you could more quickly identify what you're looking for. The other thing that's a bit lacking there is there's not a lot of spacing around the icons, which really hurts readability because there's not enough negative space around the shapes, making them kind of hard to quickly identify. So those are two things that we're working on to try to improve that, but it's a good point.
Okay, thank you.
People care, of course, a lot about how Blender looks and the UI and design. And there's really a big group active on reviewing and the design process. It's not very visible, but it is very open. You can go to DevTalk, you can probably search for icons and you find the thread. And there's also at the developer.blender.org website, we have what we call design topics, with design reviews. People can post designs and then get feedback from people, pages. So most of the things have been said, have been looked at, and then we make a new version, another version. And I think we're still optimizing this based on all the feedback we get. And design help is welcome, right? Yeah.
We even have icons yet to be designed for certain tools and the toolbar, so yeah.
Do you think you're a good interface designer? Come on board, right? Make mock-ups, come with ideas that you think, oh, I understand the requirements of the new system, but in this and this and that way, we can make it more visible and more clean or more clear to show the functionality. That's super good. 2, 3.
Yeah, there's a question. I think, Ton, you had mentioned in the past there was a plan to look at the animation system and revisit that for update. I think you mentioned Animation 2020 or something. I just wondered if there's an update on that.
Okay, Animation 2020, right? What is it? Well, I simply Because I've been working also with the studios, Tencent Animation, we know the studios in France, and there is people from the Nimble Collective doing high quality work. I think animation is the core of a tool like Blender. It is modeling, but animation I think is really what it is about. And the design of the current rigging system is from the 90s. Very early 2000s, but end 90s, early 2000s, that's when we designed it. And it was based on how Hash Animator works. Anyone know Hash Animator? But that was then a very popular animation tool. And a little bit with a slant eye looking at what Softimage was doing. And that's how we were designing this. And I think we have to do it over again. Or at least, or take a couple of steps back and say, okay, so this is what we have and this is what we want. What do we have to fix in order to be ready for the next decade? And you always have to make things for the future, not for the past. That's why we should call it 2020, and then we have still 18 months. Huh? So there's no less. 14, oh my God, we have only 14 months, and then it's 2020. So yeah, I have to hurry. But the idea is to collect the brain power of some of the bigger studios, people who designed Primo and Presto, but also people like Daniel and Bassam and the top riggers we have in our community, to find the specifications for a better rigging system in Blender. But probably it will be part of the everything nodes, because the riggers want to have nodes as well. They want to have a node-based system, and we should get the drivers and constraints should also be node-based, right? Modifiers should be node-based. So if you have all of that already as a node-based system, I think your rigging can also become much more advanced, so that you don't have to abuse the rigging system like it is now. And I expect that with a good design, that rigging and animation will also be. And my goal is to get the funding and the people on board for it and interest the studios out there. But there are hundreds, thousands of animation studios who all want to boot Autodesk. And they're all looking at Blender and think, I don't know, Maya animation is really good. Can Blender give us the same level of support as what Maya has? And I think, yeah, I think we are close. We can replace Maya. But even better, we are going to work on the next decade of animation tools. And the people in Autodesk are not interested in that. And that's why people should come on board and help us making Blender awesome. It was 2020.
My question is really specific. It's about can we expect to have an improvement for the bevel modifier, especially for the auto smooth? Because when we auto smooth with the bevel modifier, it's really difficult to have a very convincing result because of the normal interpolation.
Have you tried the 2.8 one? It has the summer students normal in there as an option, and people who've tried it seem to feel it's much better than the old one. Or are you talking about the 2.8 one?
I haven't tested in 2.8.
Try it out.
So it's here right now.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
Jason.
Just a very simple question. What's the status on freestyle? Does anybody know? Is it going to be in the beta?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's still working. I'm not aware of major bugs in there. So, I mean, the thing is, people were mostly using it in conjunction with Blender internal. So, it'll work. If it's not working, it's a bug. That's the other thing, yeah. But I don't know if that will be in
script, so we just need to fix those. But there was big work done to support this new dependency graph and other things, so should be there.
But the Google Summer of Code project from Yiming Wu, isn't that meant to replace the... No? Something new. Something new, yeah, but I thought it could replace it, no? You can just boot, no? Oh, okay. was first. I don't know why. I thought you said, surprise, I am Liu Meng Wu. Oh, no, okay. That's...
Yes. He's like there for 1 hour. To raise his hand.
Thanks. Is there a plan to work on the parts of Blender impacted by the linear workflow? Like, for example, curves that now are... you really need to play at the bottom of the curve to adjust contrast, for example. Like a middle gray became 0.18. So if you want to make contrast with curve, you just have really a small part of the curve to play with.
Okay, like middle gray, that works everywhere. But I think what we can do, and I think that's something that the color management people have been asking for, is basically to add in various places in the user interface to be able to say, I want to edit the curve in this specific color space. And so any place where we have curves, it would make a lot of sense to have a way to say, like, edit this in this color space, and then middle gray might be like around 0.5 or something. So I think that's something we can definitely add. Yeah. Not that I'm aware of. I'm not aware of any patch for it. But no, he's asking for it, pushing for someone to add it, but I'm not aware of any active work on it.
Hello, thank you very much, first of all, for all of your hard work. And I wanted to ask you, because I most years lately spent in game development and in tools like Houdini and Substance Designer, which is heavily node-based. Is there any plan to improve the node editor in general? For example, like when you are trying to add a new node, changing the default Shift-A, for example, to something like space, or make it available to change it in preferences, or the quick toolbars of adding most recently used or placed node and stuff like that, which could really improve the UX experience?
I guess when we use the node editor much more, there will be many new ideas how we can make the workflow faster. I tried quite a few things in animation nodes as well, and I will try to get some of the good ideas into Blender. So.
Come with design proposals. So write down what you think and submit it.
Hello. Here, my question is about hair dynamics. Any plans to improve the collision system?
I mean, that's like related to physics topics, and we don't have a lot of people working on physics currently. So yes, it's planned. It's planned, of course, like new fluid, new smoke, etc.
I mean, how many years do we need with all of you full-time working on Blender to have everything done this group here would want to have? What do you think? Huh?
Dr. Sergey, what is your guess?
Can the Council 2.8 release and stop like worrying about bug tracker, or bug tracker still on board and
yeah? No bug tracker? Okay.
No bug tracker?
No bug tracker? Huh?
I don't know, maybe in... Yeah, I think maybe an hour, yeah.
Oh, yeah, 1 hour. Ah, wonderful. Just delete everything and start over, and then you don't have any bugs.
Yeah.
Ah, fantastic idea. There was one discussion I had with Zacharias. He's not here, but he mentioned scoped. Sculpting is a super important and popular feature, but it feels like it's a little bit behind in support level. And like the competition is sculpting much faster and better than Blender is sculpting. So is there any developer who thinks, yes, I'm going to pick sculpting up as my next passion?
There are lots of technical stuff which is similar to what we solved in dependency graph. So I guess there is one guy who will be looking to those. But like there are also like other things we can do. There are like some algorithmical stuff to reduce amount of computation which happens for every like stroke step, which is like ridiculous.
But Howard, you also have been looking at modeling, mesh modeling. Have you ever looked at the sculpting code, or is that completely different?
No, I haven't looked at sculpting.
Okay. Who was you and you? There was somebody else too here in this corner.
And what's the current state of Attract? I'm not sure if it's in beta or not. And is there future plans for it?
The current state of Attract is that it needs some extra love. For one, I have to make it the Attract add-on compatible with 2.8 because it's doing OpenGL drawing, and I need to do the integration between Attract and Flamenco better, so that you can go into the Attract interface and say, I want to re-render this scene, for example, maybe change some settings, sample count, that kind of stuff. So we have all kinds of plans for the future of Attract. Yeah.
And maybe some kind of calendar for every user for know what tags have in each day or week?
Yeah, that should be relatively simple to add. So write a ticket about this on the developer.blender.org, assigned to me.
So it's, we're getting close to the end. I would like to do a little experiment. That's a silly idea. Because people talk about democracy, people want to vote for features. So I thought, let's try if we can find out if we can do a vote here for a thing. And then I will try to find out if we can make it happen. What? Isn't that a nice idea? But the feature should have a majority of in this group. So we first have to figure out what is that feature then that might have a majority here in this group. And to make it more feasible, should not be more than 1 month developer time, right? 1 month of developer time, and I will find out who can do it and talk to the guys. But
okay, 1 month?
1 month of developer time.
Oh, sequencer should be possible, right? In 1 month. Yeah, a sequencer, of course. No, sequencer. Yeah, no, you said 1 month. I mean, I know. Come on, you can do it. Exactly. Just bring it up to speed. You don't have to remake it. Just bring it up. Okay, hands up for the video sequencer.
Is there another proposal for a...
Compositor, faster, better, nicer.
I agree.
See, he agrees. Make Compositor great again. That's a good, nice problem.
Yes. And the third one. Who has the third idea to start voting for? You have one.
Light groups or light linking, it's called, I want that. Light groups, like you have an object and you have like a character, but I want it, it's not there. If it takes less than a month, then it's okay. But I really like that.
Wait, where's the microphone here? Oh, no. Brecht, what was the issue with light groups?
There's no fundamental issue. I mean, there was at one point a patch from Tangent Animation, which I think did it the wrong way, but we can do it the right way. It's not super complicated.
But it's more like a feature you think is problematic, as in design-wise, or is it...
Well, I think generally if you're using... I'm not a big fan of light groups in general as a workflow.
But I don't have a political feature.
No. I don't have anything against adding it. If I was like running an animation studio, and I would say like, please don't try to use it as little as possible because it causes all kinds of problems if you heavily use it.
But would you advise to instead that it will also work as good as light groups?
No, what I would advise is to do. No, I mean I would advise to have a workflow where you design your materials and test them in different lighting environments and ensure they respond well. But it doesn't work for everything. If you have like a more less realistic thing, you might want them anyway. But I mean, I have no problem against it. Adding them, so if someone writes a good patch for it, I will happily accept it in Cycles.
Okay, but I think this topic is still design stuff, right? We have to agree first on how to do it. So, is there another third idea? Yeah.
Maybe not idea, just the question to you, Tom. Can I ask you one question of the official standpoint? Can I?
But they're trying to vote now. Right?
Okay, so let's vote first.
I need a third idea to start voting for. What? Do you have one?
Real-time video streaming of Eevee over HTTP. Of Eevee over HTTP.
Why?
Okay, so now everybody has to make up their minds, right? So you have a real-time HTTP video YouTube in Eevee. We have the compositor, and we have the video sequence editor, right? Everybody made up their minds. So so let's vote for a compositor. Who wants a compositor? That's like 1/3. The other. Who wants video sequencer? There's not a bit more. And who likes to have YouTube in Eevee? It's a great feature, by the way. Yeah. Okay, then that one goes away. So now between the compositor and the video sequence editor. Video sequence editor? No. Compositor? What do you think? I think the video sequencer has won the vote. Yes? Yoo! So for next year at the conference, we will see the result of this experiment. Okay, I'm wrapping up. Thanks everyone online, thanks everyone here, and a big applause for the developers.